This vote that happened yesterday was non-binding. It was just symbolic emotion. So what's next?
Well, first of all, this particular one specifically dealt with national security and whether or not we should be using tariffs and calling it under the guise of national security. The president does have other tools to use with regard to tariffs. Our concern was that in this case he had suggested tariffs with regard to both Canada and Mexico, who are allies. And so this simply sent the message that, look, that's not the intent of this particular section of the law. If you want to do it, there are other provisions that have some conditions on them that you're most certainly welcome to use, but please don't use the national security as the provision or the reason for imposing tariffs on our allies.
But aside from sending a message, what can Congress do?
Look, no member of Congress by themselves has the ability to make a change. The president as an individual, but as the executive, the chief executive officer, he can make certain decisions because he's been granted that authority by Congress in the past. For our part, we have to act as a body. And in this particular case, it would take an action on both the House and the Senate, and if it's legislation, to be signed by the president. But what we can do is drive messages, and we can discuss the fact that if we have concerns, we can bring those concerns to the executive branch. This was one attempt by the Congress, by the Senate, to send a message to the executive branch that this was not the intent of that language that was established way back in 1962 to begin with, and that it has not been used in this method since that time. And so for Congress, it was a message of saying, look, if you're going to use this as a national security issue, then we're going to rethink this, and we're prepared to rethink whether or not that authority should continue to be granted.
So, Senator, as you say, you've got one person in the president, you've got 535 people over there on Capitol Hill. That makes it very complicated. And Congress has given the president that authority to pass. The Constitution actually gives a lot of authority to the Congress when it comes to dealing with overseas issues like trade. Are you essentially saying that the Congress cannot act as an effective check on the president and his trade policy today?
There are some things that we can do. And one of them is if you want to talk about a trade promotion authority, you can not renew it, as an example. In our case, we really want to see free trade. We want to see more trade. The concern that we've got is, and we want this president to succeed, but we also know, because each one of us hears from our folks back home, we're seeing the impacts of what the current tactics are doing to our own citizens. I'll give you an example. In South Dakota, we're a heavy ag state. Our farmers right now are in the middle of getting ready for harvest. Winter wheat harvest is being done right now. Spring wheat comes. We're going to have soybeans. We're going to have sunflowers. We're going to have corn. But just the producers in our state have already, on their balance sheets, they're suffering since March 1st until now about $800 million in losses on their balance sheets due to the drop of commodity prices related, we believe, directly to the chaos in the market with regard to commodity prices. Right. And we think part of that is because of the threat of retaliation due to the president's attempt here to try to change policy on trade here. We wanted to be successful, right, but we need him to understand that time is of the essence for a lot of producers.
As we talk today, those threats are growing. They are not diminishing. We're talking about another $200 billion worth, and he's talking even about $200 billion past that. There's no sign at the moment that this is going to lessen. So I guess what I'm really asking you, Senator, are you saying we need to give him some time, for some rope, if you will, to see if it'll work, but at some point we're going to have to rein the president in if it keeps going wrong? Or are you saying there is nothing we can do?
I think, first of all, we are suggesting that this is rope, and that the president clearly has to understand that those people who are his supporters in the upper Midwest and elsewhere, they believe in him. They want him to succeed, but they also see this as giving the president more rope. And they're saying, please understand, this is hurting us in our pocketbook. Some of us can't survive if this continues on this way. So they want him to understand that. They think his intent is honorable. They think he's trying to do the right thing, but they're very concerned about his tactics. And they're sending the message, look, this is like taking rope. You have to understand what you're doing to yourself. You're putting yourself in a very precarious position. Please understand that. And then at the same time, I've talked with the Soybean Association, I've talked with the Corn Association, I've talked with the American Farm Bureau. All of them are concerned about what's going on with commodity prices right now and the impact that the threat of a major trade war is having on commodity prices today.
And the president is not just rattling allies when it comes to trade. It's the same thing with national security and alliances. This time around in Brussels, he talked about the fact that he probably can withdraw from NATO without congressional approval. Now, Congress then sent a motion saying you support NATO. What else can Congress do other than just sending these motions and messages?
Well, I think that's the first thing that we do is we're, and matter of fact, we're sending a message to NATO right now saying, look, long term, we recognize how important you are. We're supportive of you. We're going to continue to send that message. We're going to continue to keep up our end in terms of our defense spending. And in fact, as of today, I think you're going to find out that we've just announced that there's a group of us where we are rekindling once again the observers for the NATO group. It's a group of 6 Republicans and 6 Democrats. I'm one of them, who will be there to try to negotiate and to work, not necessarily negotiate, but to be communicators on behalf of NATO back to Congress and to share on behalf of Congress to NATO our strong support and our interest in the continued success of the organization.
Senator, would you vote for increasing defense spending for the United States government up to 4% of our GDP?
Right now, we're actually over that amount.
I believe we're at 3.5%, sir. Isn't that right?
Okay, I was thinking, that's right. Our GDP is growing rather rapidly now, isn't it?
Yeah. So
look, here's the point that I would say on it is this. Right now, we did what we thought was the correct amount that was needed by the government as best we could with everything else. But I can tell you this much: we're up over $85 billion a year. In fact, we were up $165 billion over the last 2 years. So coming from where we were, we are going to continue to increase it based upon the threats that are out there. And you mentioned it earlier, you've got NATO as a strong ally. One of the reasons why NATO has to be strong is because our near-peer competitors include China and Russia. And so we're going to continue to once again see increases, we believe, in defense spending to meet that risk that is currently being posed to us by our near-peer high-end competitors.
And right now, of course, while all of this is happening, Congress is busy trying to go through everything when it comes to the Supreme Court nominee, Kavanaugh. How confident are you that you'll be able to approve him before October or by October? And when can we expect a confirmation hearing?
We've had several discussions with leadership with regard to what their plans are, and right now we'd like to have the process completed by about October 1st or thereabouts. We recognize that that this gentleman has a huge history. He's got over 300 separate opinions. We want to make sure that those are all made available. We want to do our due diligence, but I can tell you, I was there at the White House the other evening, and the first impression that he has made was a positive one. The emotion, the sense, the message that he left us with was one that he truly is a judge's judge. His first impression for all of us that were there was, wow, the president did a great job once again. He's chosen someone who could stand the test of time and most certainly will be a very, very strong advocate for the Constitution, number one, and reading the Constitution and sticking with the Constitution and not creating law from the bench. And those are all really positive things for the vast majority of the members in the United States Senate.